When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up. I say something, and then it usually happens. Maybe not on schedule, but it usually happens. Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is a disaster. I think it is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Work like hell, I mean you just have to put in 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. The first step is to establish that something is possible. Then probability will occur. Really pay attention to negative feedback and solicit it, particularly from friends. Hardly anyone does that, and it's incredibly helpful. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it's not. People should pursue what they're passionate about. That will make them happier than pretty much anything else. I think the best way to attract venture capital is to try and come up with a demonstration of whatever product or service it is, and ideally take that as far as you can. Life is too short for long-term grudges. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. It's okay to have your eggs in one basket as long as you control what happens to that basket. There's a tremendous bias against taking risks. Everyone is trying to optimize their ass covering. I don't spend my time pontificating about high-concept things. I spend my time solving engineering and manufacturing problems. I think it is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. I would just question things. It would infuriate my parents that I wouldn't just believe them when they said something, 'cause I'd ask them why, and then I'd consider whether that response made sense given everything else I knew. People work better when they know what the goal is and why. It is important that people look forward to coming to work in the morning and enjoy working. The path to the CEO's office should not be through the CFO's office, and it should not be through the marketing department. It needs to be through engineering and design. Great companies are built on great products. Really, the only thing that makes sense is to strive for greater collective enlightenment. Patience is a virtue, and I'm learning patience. It's a tough lesson. I don't create companies for the sake of creating companies, but to get things done. Talent is extremely important. It's like a sports team. The team that has the best individual player will often win. But then there's a multiplier from how those players work together and the strategy they employ. I think it is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. If something is important enough, even if the odds are stacked against you, you should still do it. Constantly seek criticism. A well-thought-out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. Brand is just a perception, and perception will match reality over time. Sometimes it will be ahead, other times it will be behind. But brand is simply a collective impression some have about a product. The lessons of history would suggest that civilizations move in cycles. You can track that back quite far: the Babylonians, the Sumerians, followed by the Egyptians, the Romans, China. We're obviously in a very upward cycle right now, and hopefully that remains the case, but it may not. The idea of lying on a beach as my main thing just sounds like the worst. It sounds horrible to me. I would go bonkers. I would have to be on serious drugs. I'd be super duper bored. I like high intensity. I don't spend my time pontificating about high concept things. I spend my time solving engineering and manufacturing problems. I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. You have to be pretty driven to make it happen. Otherwise, you will just make yourself miserable. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion. It's very important to like the people you work with. Otherwise, life and your job is going to be quite miserable. It's very important to take risks. I think that's a quite admirable thing to do.